Hello, I'm Eric Matisik, co-chair of Denver Startup Week. Last year, we were able to bring the global audience together for Denver Startup Week, and this year, we're excited to welcome that global audience back as we celebrate and showcase the best of entrepreneurship that the Denver ecosystem in Colorado has to offer, in Denver and beyond. There are lots to explore this week, but most importantly, we're excited that you're joining us. We have nearly 50 sponsor companies who contribute to make Denver Startup Week possible. Let's show our love for these companies today and all week long. Thanks to our headquarters and title sponsor, Amazon, and our title sponsors whose leadership makes this week come to life, Capital One Cafe, the Downtown Denver Partnership, Fluid Truck, Hotel Engine, and WeWork, and our track sponsors who've made all the great content you're hearing today possible, which includes our founder track sponsor, Kickstart, our growth track sponsor, Friday Health Plans, developer track sponsor, Quizlet, product track sponsor, Palantir, design track sponsor, Battery 621 and the Public Works, people track sponsor Exactly, and the spotlight event sponsor, Strat Labs. Our headline event sponsors are bringing this excitement to the entire week. Thank you to B-Side Fund, Colorado Public Radio, Comcast, Coors Brewing Company, Denver Pavilions, Entrepreneurship at the University of Denver, Gusto, JP Morgan Chase, Method, Moss Adams, Pi Insurance, Promontory Mortgage Path, Red Bull Basement, Southwest, Tattered Cover, and the VF Venture Foundry. Finally, thank you to our sponsors and member sponsors who are listed on the screen, and thank you for your support of Denver Startup Week. Now, let's get to it.
Hello, Denver. We are so excited to be here. We're excited to tell you a bit more about the Foundry for Builders program and to be a part of the Denver startup ecosystem. We moved our headquarters to Denver in the last year, and we're excited to call Denver home. Foundry for Builders, essentially we're offering our end-to-end Foundry solution that is deployed to major governments and enterprises worldwide to early and growth stage companies so that they can build their business on Foundry from day one.
Hi everyone, welcome to Denver Startup Week. My name is Ryan Margolis and I'm the Product Track Chair and member of the Denver Startup Week Organizing Committee. Thank you for joining us for the 10th anniversary of Denver Startup Week. At DSW, we strive to make all of our sessions a space where attendees can connect, learn, and grow, regardless of age, gender identity, gender expression, race, ability, or sexual orientation. A special thank you to our sponsors for their support in helping us to keep DSW free and accessible for all. Thank you for joining us. Have a great week.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Jordan Smallwood. I'm currently a product manager at Amazon, and I'm joined on this panel by all the lovely people you see here to talk about hybrid teams and really how we get stuff done in this current digital / in-person environment. So before we get started, I wanted to introduce a few of the panelists and have them tell you a little bit about themselves before we start diving in. So in alphabetical order, let's start with Alfredo.
Hi, my name is Alfredo Marquez. I am product manager at Bear. We are not a startup, but we're my group, Diversified Channels, is actually the smaller piece of Bear, which we act like a startup almost. I handle paint products for the Kills brand and private labels. So if you're familiar with The Spruce, the blog, The Spruce, we handle their paints, as well as Magnolia Home by Joanna Gaines.
All right, and then next, Heather, you want to jump in?
Sure. My name's Heather Lay. I am one of the product leads for a group called Walmart Data Ventures. So obviously Walmart's a massive enterprise company globally, but Walmart Data Ventures is a new group that started up over, I think, less than 2 years ago. I joined about 6 months ago to this organization. And we operate a little bit like a startup in that we're kind of in stealth mode and getting ready to launch our first product.
All right, Shayna, you want to take it next?
Hi, everyone. I'm Shayna Sabo. I am product owner at Notion, which is a startup. I've been there for about 3.5 years now. And we have a smart home sensor, and we partner with insurance companies to make people better homeowners and to reduce risk for those people. So I kind of sit in the middle of all the action internally and make sure our teams have what they need and understand the business value. And yeah, that's me.
Awesome. All right, Zoe, what you got for us?
That's a lot of pressure. I'm Zoe. I am a senior product manager at LaunchDarkly, which is a software product for software engineers that essentially allows them to have feature management control. So separating the deployment process from the release process. My team specifically focuses on the overall user experience of the product. We own the design system. We touch things like accessibility, information architecture, and just making sure that the product overall is usable and a delightful experience for our customers. Prior to this, I was a PM at Envision, which is a design software, but also a 100% remote company.
Awesome. Well, I guess before we get started, I think, putting on my product hat, which seems to be permanently affixed to my head, to kind of set the situation here, depending on, what company you work for, teams can be of many different sizes. So I guess to set the context for from the panelists, would you all be willing to share how large or small your teams are that you currently work in, right? Like for me at Amazon, it's not like I'm working with all 1 million Amazonians, but what are, in your day-to-day, how big or small are your teams? And feel free to jump in, by the way. First come, first serve, I guess.
I can go. So Notion so we were acquired last year by Comcast. So actually at the very start of the pandemic, so March 2020, it was quite the transition. But we are a team of about 30 and then at Notion, and then our product and engineering team is about 15. So about half that, but that's spread between designers, engineers, QA, and yeah.
Of course. Alfredo, what about you? Your day-to-day teams, how large are they?
Sure. Just give you kind of an idea of Bear itself. Bear is a parent company of Masco. Masco is a couple of 20, 30,000 globally. Bear is about 2,000 globally. Our business unit itself is about 100 people, if you include sales. But my day-to-day is when it comes to product development and product management, it can range depending on the project between 5 to 25 people. Depending on what kind of needs we need cross-functionally. So it varies, but yeah.
And Zoe, what about you, especially in your current role? Because I know you've been able to see, a wide variety of team sizes.
Yeah, actually, LaunchDarkly and Envision both were kind of similar sizes, but our company as a whole right now is like right around 400 people. We follow a squad model. So my squad has 7 people on it, including the product designer, the engineering manager, myself, and then our engineers. And then our product org right now is about 9 people. Product delivery as a whole is about 100.
Got it. Heather, I'm actually interested on your side how you all work, because I know Walmart, especially on the kind of venture side, has they've toyed with different sizes. So I'm interested to see how it is in your current capacity.
Yeah, so the Data Ventures business unit is about 100 associates. I would say the cross-functional team that I work with, building the product I'm working on, is about 25 people across all different job functions. And then there are about 5 product managers at different levels. And everything's kind of chaotic right now because we're just getting ready for our first MVP launch. I'm sure you all know what that feeling is like. And so it's all hands on deck. We're all helping out wherever we can. But as soon as we get some breathing room, we're going to start organizing into squads. We're starting to we're hiring a bunch right now. And then we hope to operate, we say like aligned, but not totally tethered or tied together.
No, this makes a lot of sense. And I think one thing that I've gotten from everybody here as a common thread is that regardless of how large the actual company is or how large the organization is, it seems like everybody here their orgs are trying to get their product teams and just teams working teams in general into as small and as intimate of a group as possible. Am I tracking that well? Is that a fair assessment for everybody here?
Yeah, I would say so. I think I've heard somewhere that like the ideal size for a team is around 6 to 8 people. So they can move faster, but also like understand each other's dynamics and build their own team norms.
That makes sense. And Alfredo, one thing that I noticed that you share with Heather that's very interesting is that similar to her, you're a part of like a smaller team within a larger organization, but not necessarily, I don't want to say perpendicular to the organization, but you're operating outside of what your main company's, I guess what they're known for, so to speak. Do you want to talk a little bit about how that feels? Because I've been a part of that maybe in terms of building out an e-commerce site for like a home improvement store. But I wanted to see what it's like when the company is a lot more directly aligned with the tech team, even though the tech team isn't necessarily a part of their core business.
Yeah, so yeah, we're completely consumer product goods. So if you're familiar with Behr paints are sold throughout Home Depot, only at Home Depot. But our diversified channels team is other channels. So Walmart, Amazon, Lowe's, all these other different places where you can purchase paint. But that gives us challenges because our team, a bunch of the way our revenue comes in, 80%, 90% comes from Behr and Home Depot, where the rest of it comes from us. It's important for us to grow, but again, the challenges there are we have to navigate the structure of the team that's built to work with Home Depot. We're not built to work with omni-channel. And so our struggles are, when we work with Amazon or we work with Walmart online or we work with Sam's Club online, connecting those pieces, we have to be a lot more nimble, and we have to be a little bit more flexible when it comes to the challenges, and communicating those challenges to our greater leadership, our executive leadership team, our ELT, is difficult because they don't see those challenges on a day-to-day basis like we do.
Right.
And so we have to navigate not only just creating product and creating, the best product experience that you can possibly have with paint, but also navigating our internal structure to let them understand that, hey, these are the struggles that we have. We need resources or we need help to help execute and commercialize product.
That makes sense. And I think, using that as, to pivot into how we're communicating in this more hybrid environment. Shayna, one thing that I find really fascinating that I think, I think people would be interested to hear is you not only are existing in a hybrid work environment, but you're doing this post-acquisition with the acquisition having started obviously at the beginning of the pandemic. So you not only got to see this transition into a hybrid working environment, but honestly under one of the more unique ways to go into a hybrid environment. How have you found communication to maybe be the same or also shift a little bit given what Notion's been having going on lately?
Yeah, so you're right. It was a lot of change at once. And I'm sure like everybody else, those first couple of weeks, we kind of just thought it was going to be for a couple of weeks and didn't think that it was going to be so permanent. But we were really set up for success, like technically speaking, having all the tools and software needed to work in a remote environment from day one. We had a very flexible in-office policy where if you needed to work from home or wanted to work from home a day or two a week, you could. Most people chose to come in most of the week, but like I said, we had the tools set up to do so. But one of the biggest changes has kind of been making sure communication is super intentional. We worked in a really small office, and it was like 2 rooms, and you could pretty much know what was going on at any time, whether you were in a meeting or not. We kind of all sat together, worked together. And that is not the case anymore. So a lot of the accidental communication that would happen when somebody's passing by your desk, or you hear a conversation that's going on, that doesn't exist anymore. So being just really intentional about your communication, and making sure that you're documenting conversations and you're documenting decisions and that you're sharing them back out. Because otherwise it takes a very short amount of time to lose what's going on, to not know, to not feel like you're in the know. And so we also have a lot of tools at Notion. So making sure that we're documenting all of our decisions that come out of a meeting in the same place, so that it's really easy to go back and find it. And for us, that's Asana, but we also use tools like Slack, and we use Envision and have comments in Envision and Miro, but just making sure that any decisions that are made are documented in Asana, no matter where that conversation happens. And then trying to use as few direct messages on Slack as possible. So you may not think it's a big deal, a side conversation, or you may not want to bother anybody else, but just making sure that those conversations are happening in a public channel, so that people aren't getting left in the dust.
That makes sense. And Zoe, I saw some very enthusiastic nods on your end, and I just wanted to get your perspective too, because you mentioned earlier that your team is kind of unique in that it almost quite, I mean, not quite literally, but it's pretty close to 50-50. So in a similar vein to Shayna, where do you find there to be overlap, and where is the experience a little bit different for your group?
Yeah, I was definitely nodding pretty vigorously there because I agree with everything Shayna said. Launch Darkly is an Oakland-based company technically, and then when COVID hit, they made it remote optional and started hiring more proactively fully remote. So I have only ever been remote for the company. There are a handful of people who work in the office, or 50% roughly, and then 50% who are part-time remote or full-time remote. We have a lot of executives, especially the head of product and technology, that came from Atlassian. And so Confluence is like our bread and butter as an organization. Even before they went remote, everything is documented in Confluence. Even during my onboarding a few months ago, it was like pretty shocking to realize I didn't have to actually Slack anyone to ask questions, because I could find an answer to everything I was looking for in Confluence. This is the first organization like I've worked for that has had that level of documentation. Every product spec, every tech spec, we have like open question docs, everything is documented. That has been incredibly helpful. And then to Shayna's point around Slack, we have a format for every new project that we create a public Slack channel for that project. We archive it at the end of the project. But that way, any communications are not happening in silos. You have the communication in a public way that anyone can follow up on, can comment on, and it makes it more clear across the entire org what teams are working on, because you can just go and follow any project as it's happening.
That makes sense. And I really like what you said about documentation. In fact, Alfredo, having dabbled in your world as well for a little bit, I think one thing that's kind of unique that I would be fascinated to get your perspective on is that because of all the different channel partners you work with, as you mentioned earlier, there is a huge need for documentation, not only documentation just in volume, but also from a formatting standpoint, making sure everything is standardized and can be distributed really quickly while maintaining accuracy. Have you found that the remote/hybrid working environment has made the need for documentation that much more important, the same, less? And if you are willing to share, how has even creating documentation changed, since what you all send out from a documentation standpoint tends to be very visually oriented? Yeah,
I mean, it's one of those things where, since we're a company that is now venturing into the e-com space, it is very important to have documentation revved up, make sure it's the correct information that's going out. And that's one thing we're struggling with. Even though we're a company that's been around since '47, being in this new future with hybrid working environments and working online, we find ourselves working on different platforms. So we have Teams, we've got Workfront, we have all these little pieces that work together but are not together. So it's a challenge right now. We're trying to get everything to kind of go into one system per se. We don't have as sophisticated systems as some of the tech companies do. So we're kind of just doing it, by hook or by crook. And we try to, me having a technical background in engineering, I try to keep some sort of structure within our system so we can say, hey, once we go to, gate 1, gate 2, gate 3, we get to here, and then we push out data to Amazon or whoever we need to, right? And that's the challenge.
Now, that's interesting. Heather, I think, and I know you only recently joined Walmart, but at the same time, I think Walmart also has similar issues, right? It's a very highly matrixed organization, right? Lots of teams, lots of departments. There's e-com, physical com, and then soon to be data com, right? Just joking. But in all seriousness, what kind of challenges or unique discoveries have you found since working at Walmart? Since, I know before you've been in more of a startup capacity, highly software tech dependent, going into a truly hybrid environment like Walmart, in a hybrid working environment, in a hybrid global economy. What are some of the discoveries you found there?
What's surprising? We have pretty much very similar challenges that any other company has. For example, we have any tool you could imagine, we have access to it. But one challenge is each division or organization in the company prefers their way of working. And so that's going to be the challenge for us. For example, the business side uses Microsoft Teams. Everything tech related uses Slack. So we're switching back and forth. And then we work with external vendors who don't have access to those tools with us. So we use Zoom for that. So I guess the challenge here with being such a complex organization is just we almost have too much access to things. Like we could use any tool we want, but how do we get everyone having a similar way of working? And so what we've found is that's too big of a beast to try to tackle. So we just make sure that our team, like that smaller 100-person org, is kind of marching to the same rhythm. And then we're adaptable to the rest of the organization. And then I think the biggest challenge, which we haven't totally overcome or resolved, is the time zone difference. So we're a global org. For example, engineers I work with are in India. Some of the product designers are in Texas. Our headquarters, so the business, is in Arkansas. I'm on the West Coast. So what we just had to honestly come up with our own way of working. So we set up our meetings. So if we need everyone there, we choose the overlap time frame. There's like an hour or two in the morning. And then for everything else, we use asynchronous communication for everything else, like what Zoe mentioned, documenting as much as possible. And then also keeping a log of decisions, because like things might change on the fly, and just making sure we know, okay, as of yesterday it was this, but today the decision is, this other direction. So I think, to answer your original question, I think the challenges we have are very similar to a smaller organization too. What we do is just be somewhat flexible. Like we have the tools in place, the processes, but then we adapt as the team is growing, because we're growing really, really fast.
Understood. And I find that interesting, right? The fluidity of, our current working environment and always trying to stay adaptable. That definitely is going to be paramount moving forward. But there's something to be said about setting, like you said, some routines and habits and ceremonies in place and being really intentional about it. Shayna, I wanted to go back to you because I was really, really impressed, and not just in the context of how you answered in this panel, but I've met other people from Notion. And I'll tell you what, everybody is like in lockstep. It's very fascinating. There's a very consistent cultural theme. And I can't help but think, seeing as you know, you don't look like you're about to like pass out, that intentional culture has helped, I think, probably made that acquisition by Comcast easier. So I guess on the subject of building an intentional culture and having, you know, consistent routines, how did you all go about doing that in this hybrid working environment?
Yeah, that was nice. All the things that you just said. Thank you. But so we have these, originally we were calling them rocks, these like bigger things that you do above and beyond your day to day that help drive the company forward. We don't necessarily call them rocks anymore, but we still kind of use that idea. And when we realized that, you know, working from home was going to be a more permanent thing, culture has always been an important part of Notion. But we actually made culture like a company rock. Like we made it the most important thing as soon as we realized that we weren't going to be able to see each other face to face at all, really, except on video. And so doing that, we just, and it was hard. I was on the culture club at the time when we were doing this, and it was a lot of work trying to figure out how we were going to make happy hours fun, how we were going to make coffee meetings fun. And we started doing lunch lottos, but it's not, you know, easy to eat on video with other people. So how are we going to make that exciting? And we decided to like move forward with our offsite that we do once a year. And so really putting, you know, a lot of time and energy into making a really good virtual offsite. And so we did that, which was awesome. It was 2 days and we kind of had a mix of business stuff, but also we did yoga and meditation and had a half an hour where everyone could just clean their desks or go clean their room or whatever they wanted to do, just like clean your space and make it a nice place to work. And so I think just putting a huge emphasis on culture was a really important thing that we did right at the beginning. Not that we hadn't, but it was just different now. So yeah, that's kind of how we put a bigger emphasis on culture. And then sorry, what was the rest of your question?
You ended up answering
okay, cool.
the entirety of it above and beyond. No, that I think that was really all I was trying to figure out. You know, what type of cultural, I guess, best practices have you found working? And as you can see from the responses on the chat, people are really taking to it. And even though I'm supposed to be the moderator and buttoned up, just know I'm storing some of these tips so I can steal. So this all makes a lot of sense. Zoe, I want to pivot to you really quickly because I think you have a unique experience with Envision, which at the beginning of COVID probably was among one of the bolder companies. And then I know now you're at Launch Darkly. So I wanted to know, what have you found what kind of cultural overlaps have you found to be successful no matter what organization you're a part of? And then on the other side, what are some things that maybe your group or your team tried at the beginning of COVID from a cultural or ceremony standpoint that you found didn't really work so well?
That's a great question. Yeah, so Envision was remote before COVID. So in some ways it was actually a little weird because I was at Envision when COVID hit. Things didn't really change very much, which sounds so twisted. Obviously, everyone had personal impact that was affecting their work life, but like work itself really didn't change. Our ceremonies didn't change. Day-to-day didn't change. Envision had one really, really great thing from a culture perspective that I loved, which might not be the most top of mind. They used a tool called Bonusly. And Bonusly basically allows everyone at the company to have a monthly stipend to give to other people. So we got $50 a month. You couldn't keep it for yourself, that you could give in chunks to other people and recognize them for particular company values that they showcased. And it was like this, almost like a Facebook feed. You could see other people's kind of recognitions that they were giving. It was a great way to feel seen, I think. And it was also an important way to have peer-to-peer recognition in a public forum rather than just the leadership down recognition. Launch Darkly does similar things. We have this idea of the highest of fives that you can give. You can basically vote for a team member that then gets acknowledged in the all hands. Similar process. Not necessarily meeting focused, but I think being able to recognize people for the work that they're doing, especially in a post-COVID world when we all have other things competing for our time and priorities, is really important. At Launch Darkly on our squad, we also do what we call mandatory fun. That is time we set every month, and we rotate who owns that meeting within the squad. So it's not so much the triad or leadership saying, this is what we're going to do to have fun as a team. Anyone can pick for their particular week what they want to talk about. It can just be an informal coffee time. It can be code names, Pictionary. We did pasta with grannies last week with a live call with a woman in Italy who was teaching us how to make gnocchi. So that's been really special too. And that actually came out of the squad asking for more informal time, because we were purposely trying to keep meetings down and give people as much uninterrupted time as possible. And they actually were asking for more because we were only spending time together as a team to talk about planning and not to just connect person to person. Yeah, and to be honest, I don't think I have a ton off the top of my head that are things that didn't go well. Mostly just when it was leadership trying to enforce something versus squad level decision making and practices that we decided on together.
That makes sense. And Alfredo, to pick on you in this regard, I'm sure you share, some of the same, I guess, how would you say it, opportunities and challenges that Zoe has mentioned, but almost that much more so, right? Because as you've mentioned earlier, Bear is more of a traditionally in-person organization. And not only that, but unlike maybe other software-driven companies or software-defined companies where literally their existence is based on a software platform. So migration to hybrid, while there may be, some differences of opinion, is still functionally pretty easy to do. How have you found, what limitations have you found in the hybrid environment with a company like Baird that tends to value more in-person, I need to see you interaction? Not that other companies do not value this heavily, by the way. Yeah.
Oh, no, I get it. I think the challenges are slightly different when you're talking about a hard goods company. Well, paint's not really hard good, but when you're talking about traditional consumer product goods, because you need to see the product, and especially with paint, you need to apply it and see how it works. And there's a consumer experience piece that we try to engage with, and we do that by having group meetings and applying paint and getting opinions and doing those things. But in the earlier times of COVID, quote, it was tough to do that because everybody was home. So we kind of worked our way around that and say, hey, we sent samples to each of the team members, had them apply the product, give us their experience, and have that kind of interaction. It is difficult because it takes a lot more time to do that, a lot more coordination. You just can't have a spontaneous meeting like, hey, go meet at R&D. We'll go ahead and apply some product and let's go figure this out, right? You can't do that in this environment. So we have our challenges, but I think we've been able to work around it. And I think the big one for us, specifically with paint, is color. Color is a big part, monster part of our how we develop product and how we produce product and review product. And on a screen, navy blue may not look like completely navy blue, right? So again, sending out samples, coordinating those samples. In the beginning, it was tough because we couldn't figure out how are we going to get product there, how are we going to do those things. But I think as we migrate, as we went along during COVID, we kind of figured out what can we work without and what we absolutely needed at home to review. And those, I think, are the challenges that I think a lot of companies have that are not software related, because you can, boot it up, start it up, and see how it's going, and say, hey, yeah, that's not working, or it's working great. You have to plan time around it and find ways to make that work, especially if you're working with something that's, even paint is easier than something that's tooled up like a true hard good. So yeah, it's a lot more planning, but I think we figured ways around that.
Yeah, and one thing, I'm really happy that you answered the way you did. I'll send you a check later. But this actually dovetails nicely into my next question that I want to pose to everybody on the panel. But Alfredo, I'll start with you since you were the most recent to answer. It seems like one thing that has stood out very, very clearly is that while the tools are really not that big of a deal, right? There are always going to be tools to do your job. That's how human beings operate. Really the biggest change, challenge, opportunity, all of it in one is the people. People matter, right? And so I guess, what are some takeaways in terms of how you even interact with your fellow coworkers professionally that you found has either changed or been made better, or that you want to be made better through hybrid working?
I think the closer teams that we work with, so our diversified channels team, that's a smaller group that we work with, our marketing, our sales. We have a pretty good pod. We communicate on a daily basis, and I think we have a pretty good relationship. We know what's I don't want to say off limits, but we know where to kind of maneuver around some sensitive subjects. Where it becomes challenging is when you work with cross-functional teams that don't report to you. So we have an R&D team that doesn't report to me. We have a supply chain team that doesn't report to me, with distribution and transportation team that doesn't report to me. So interacting with them is a little bit more difficult because you just don't, there's so many people in the company that it's just so hard to really gather relationships. So I try to find a point person within each of the silos and try to find ways to just communicate with them on a personal level. And, can you do me a solid and find out what's going on with this? Where's the next iteration of the product, things like that. And that way, at least you're fostering some sort of like personal relationship with them online, and not feeling like, hey, I'm throwing over something by email or by IM or by chat and saying, hey, where is it? And it becomes a little bit more, I'll do for you, do for me, a little quid pro quo. So I find it to be a little bit more using the soft skills a little bit more, and just trying to understand that, hey, they're in it just like we are, and just try to empathize with them as we have our discussions.
Makes sense. And yeah, I want to open it up to Heather, Shayna, Zoe. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I was going to say one thing that has been working well for our group, because the product managers are all working with our own teams and like working on different projects. One way that we just, build camaraderie is every other day we have an end of the day stand up, and it's really just your airing your grievances, like asking each other for tips on like, this is the challenge I experienced today. What would you have done differently? It's just, and it's optional. But it's just a good way to like close out the day, and also get some tips for how like tomorrow could be done better for you. I think it's as a leader, it's also helpful for me to kind of know what the team is going through. Like, I don't necessarily need to jump in and help all the time, but I love to hear everyone else sharing ideas with each other. Little things like, I heard this in the retro today, like, I'm trying to get more people to participate in the grooming session. How are you doing it with your team? Like little things like that.
Got it. What about you, Shayna?
Yeah, I would say a couple things. As a company, we have weekly meetings, whether it's like within like an engineering weekly team meeting, we have a product weekly team meeting, and that product one is really like leads of each, like marketing, partnerships, operations, customer success, design, and engineering. And it might sound cumbersome because it's weekly, but we start with an icebreaker every single week, and we rotate, and they're usually pretty fun or funny. And it just really helps to get to know your coworkers that you don't meet with very often. And then we also do personal wins and business wins. So like, what's something good that's happening in your life right now? And what's something good that's happening at work right now? And what that does is it helps you get to know your coworkers a little bit better, or maybe they don't have personal good news that week, and that might be sad, or might be a reason why, they're not 100% like focused in a meeting. But what it does is it just helps me specifically like lead with empathy, instead of, all business all the time. I'm usually the one running the meetings, and I want to make sure we're starting and ending on time. And it doesn't allow for chit chat very much. They're very business driven, but when we do have time for it, just getting to know your coworkers. And that way, if somebody's like off in a meeting, you're not, you're compassionate and maybe asking questions first before, like, hey, is there anything I can do to help, before you're like, hey, why were you in a bad mood in this meeting?
That makes sense.
Yeah. So just leading with empathy has been a huge shift for me, at least.
Got it. And Zoe, before moving on to you, Shayna, Ben Fowler, hey, Ben, he had a question. You wanted to know in what form are the wins shared? He missed that last part.
Yeah, so we have the same agenda for it's called an L10 meeting. It's EOS worldwide. If you want to, it's like a whole kind of like startup way of working. And we use parts of it now. But it starts with an icebreaker, and then you do personal wins and business wins, and you kind of go around the room. And then the rest of the meeting is pretty structured, but it really helps with the agenda. You know what you're going into, where you have a place to share information or get information, or if you need a decision, but it's at the very, very beginning of those meetings.
Got it.
Just a quick 5 minutes.
We do something more we have a weekly meeting with like the whole cross-functional team, and we reserve, I think, like 5 minutes at the end where anyone can give a shout out to anyone else or a thank you for whatever they may have helped you with. It's a feel good moment, and people actually like prep what they're gonna say before they get there, because they're so excited to share like, kudos for their teammates. And then we do something like that on Slack where we tag the person and we hand them, or we give them taco emojis. No idea where the taco thing came about, but it's now a tradition. So we hand out tacos on Tuesdays.
Nice. And Zoe, what about you? I mean, what are some kind of interesting discoveries, or maybe like new things you want to try, and as it relates to the people in your org during this time?
I would echo what both Heather and Shayna said around like the shout outs and wins. We do that every Friday at like the top of our team kind of weekly wrap, that I think is such a positive way to go into the weekend. One thing that's probably pretty obvious to other people, but for me was harder, is because I've only ever been remote at this company and my previous company, I didn't have the luxury of like getting to know people in person and then transitioning into a remote environment with those people. So the cross-functional roles and overlap was really difficult, and is still difficult. And both within the product delivery org and outside of it, if I ever have calls with people, I try and very purposely spend the first 5 minutes not talking about anything work related, because I have a tendency to want to just go right into like, here's what we need to get done. Here are the order of operations. And taking 5 minutes just to ask questions about their personal life, I think is not only helpful to make people enjoy working together more, but also, if someone's telling me about their kid and then a couple of weeks later, their kid's sick and they have to be out, echoing Shayna's point around empathy, you can have so much more empathy for people when you actually know them, versus this is just a coworker, and it's harder to kind of form those connections. So that's been the biggest thing that I've been proactively trying to do, just to actually get to know people across the org.
That makes sense. And everybody, I know we're kind of rounding the bend here. I wanted to stop for a second to give people time to answer questions. I know we've been having a nice, fast, flowing conversation. Is there anything that anybody, maybe hasn't gotten answered so far? I've been kind of looking at the chat, and I want to make sure we accommodate any needs people have or questions. And actually, while people are formulating those, if they have them, Another question to the group again. If you can only pick one tool, right? Let's say, I hope this doesn't happen, but let's say in a parallel dimension, there was, you had to make one choice. You could pick one tool to help your organization survive through the remainder of, this, how would you say, forced hybrid environment? So I guess let's start with, let's see, Zoe, which tool would you pick if you could only choose one?
Gosh. So I think it would be Confluence, just because that's what we're primarily already using as our tool of documentation. But really, any of the tools that allow for multiplayer collaboration, like if I'm in a Confluence doc, I can see other people actively in it. Same with Google Docs, Figma files, Miro files, like that ability to have the live play together, I think is so critical now more than ever. So really anything that falls into that space, but Confluence mostly.
Okay, got it. Alfredo, what about you, man?
As like I said, we're pretty fragmented when it comes to the platforms that we have. So to pick one, it would be kind of crazy. I'd say, if we're to pick one, probably Workfront. I think that would be probably the most applicable across all our, not only other business units, but within our silos.
Got it. What about you, Heather?
I think it would have to be Slack. I'm probably on Zoom the most of all tools, but I think Slack is the tool of choice for us to get to communicate quickly, especially because we're all in different time zones. So we can't all be at the same place at the same time. But for working, definitely Confluence, because it houses all of our product requirements right now. So I can't live without it.
Heather, I think now I know what's in your innermost heart. You must like that aspect of Slack where somebody sends a message, hey, this is in multiple time zones. Are you sure you want to send this? Okay, noted. Heather does not want her sleep time disturbed by global partners. Makes sense. Shayna, what about you?
Oh man, I'd probably have to pick Asana just because that is where our everything lives across the company. It's how we know who's working on what. That's where we put all of our tickets and acceptance criteria, and it doesn't go down very often, but when it does go down, I am at a loss. So
as soon as it goes down, you just go, well, I'm going home today, right? Oh, wait, I am home. Oh, no, I'm just kidding.
What do I have to do today? I don't even know.
Right. So we have a question coming in from Ben. I'll read it out. And anybody who wants to take this, feel free. The previous mention of one company being incredibly great at documenting decisions. How did you encourage/enforce team members to effectively document decisions? I find some team members have a much greater tendency to naturally jot those things down versus others, and wondering how your company did that consistently. Ben, I feel like you're a plant for my company because I feel very exposed right now, but that's a great question. So anybody feel free to take it.
I can speak just to bring up Confluence again. They have page templates, which I know is something probably a lot of tools have. So we have a product spec template that you always start a new product decision with, and it's formalized. And even if it's like pretty basic in terms of where you are in the discovery or kickoff process, it's consistent for everyone. And then I wouldn't say it's necessarily enforced, it's more so encouraged and just kind of expected by all squads, because you're looking for that information from others as well. And as we think about like our annual planning, our quarterly planning, our weekly planning, as we do it, we have all of that listed out. So we go squad by squad and talk about what everyone's working on for the week. And it all tracks back to our tech specs, our product specs, all of our milestones and deliverables. So you almost are at a point that you can't live without it.
Makes sense. Anybody else want to take a stab at that question? Alfredo, I see you nodding a little bit. What's going on?
I mean, again, different platforms. I know you guys use some different project management systems. We are actually StageGate, which is very, very antiquated. It doesn't move quick. So the good thing about that is that documenting, I think we have two separate pieces of documentation. We have stage gate documentation that we do at every stage to kind of go through what happened during that stage. And that's more high level, and I think we're pretty good at that. What I think we need to work on and try to overcome is the day-to-day challenges of documenting what happened from the day before, what kind of decisions were made by Walmart or Amazon that we need to apply to the product development or even, commercialization, so we can move smoother. And I think that's where our challenges lie. And that, I think that would happen regardless if it was 100% online or in person. But I think if I look at how we document our changes and how we document our progress, we use our stage gate templates to kind of work us through the high level, but at our day-to-day level, it's a little bit more difficult because we're on separate platforms.
Right. And before moving on to Heather, Alfredo, I really like what you said. Again, taking my moderator hat off, because I think this is something that is really important to double click on, if you will. But ultimately, regardless of the tool, right, what you're getting at and what also Shayna and Zoe have, said in a similar vein is that regardless of what the tool is that you use to document decisions, documentation has to be intentional, right? In other words, the tool, again, can help you do something more efficiently, faster, whatever, but ultimately you don't just want to have idle documentation. Everything has to have a purpose, has to be solving a problem. And again, as our Confluence friends have mentioned, you want to make sure it follows the same format since we are all creatures of habit. Heather, what are your thoughts there? Because I know you're going to have to jet soon. And also this will probably be, you'll probably be our last answer here.
No pressure. I would say, well, I wanted to answer Ben's question first. So for us, that's very true. Everyone's gonna, some people may prefer to document things, some just rely on their memory. I just think that the product managers kind of are aware of this, and it's their responsibility to keep the specs up to date. So although the conversation might happen in the JIRA ticket, once it's decided on, and that's what the functionality is going to be, then we just go back to the Confluence page and make an update, and we just log it like, per this meeting, decided this. Now, sorry, Jordan, what was your question?
No, actually, that was the question. And I think you also neatly completed Alfredo's point that he had started earlier, which is another important thing that, again, I know I'm personally passionate about, which is being disciplined in the form that you're using. Like you said, hey, we're going to maybe have the conversation in JIRA, but once that conversation is completed and we've made a decision, we need to stick with that decision, not have, maybe side action conversations or discussions without, including the original decision makers. That's a really good point. And so, everybody, thanks for coming. Just a few takeaways here that I think I feel confident that everybody here collectively said that seems to be almost like a top 3 rules of the road, if you will, to take on your journey. One, the culture your organization creates is the ultimate determinant of your success. I think all the panelists here, despite all the tactics that may have been mentioned today, ultimately, culture is the foundation that influences it all, right? You can't do anything without having an intentional, strong, and consistent culture where everybody's operating in lockstep. And as a result, what kind of builds off that, especially in the hybrid environment, is that the culture is also going to influence how you communicate, what you communicate, when you communicate. In other words, just like, since the dawn of time and the creation of language, communication matters. It's important. And in a hybrid environment, communication is probably the primary thing holding us all together these days, which is awesome. I think we're getting back to the human element. And speaking of the human element, I think one unique takeaway from here that I know I'm definitely going to be valuing more and taking into my day-to-day job is ceremonies matter. In other words, having these routines, traditions that everybody can engage in, and not just functionally, right? Not just to do the job, but also to get to know each other and get closer as people, despite not being able to be in person. That seems to be monumentally important, it seems. So, without further ado, I know everybody has to jump into different meetings. In fact, I have to jump into a PRD meeting myself to draft up some requirements. So thank you, everybody, for attending. Thank you, Alfredo. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Shayna. Thank you, Zoe. Really appreciate you all joining. And I look forward to unapologetically stealing all of your tips that you left here today. So yeah, without further ado, hope everybody has a good rest of their day and a good rest of their DSW.
Thanks for hosting, Jordan.
Jordan.
Peace out.
Bye.
Bye.
Right on.